would you wipe out your family to be with me?
The just-released video shows 30-year-old Nichol Kessinger being interrogated.
Did you ever say anything to him about, like...
Never.
Anything about his kids being a problem? Anything about his wife being a problem?
Never. This shocked me just as much as I think it shocked the rest of the world.
She breaks down, sobbing over the gruesome fate of the children, 4-year-old Bella and 3-year-old Celeste.
He's so disgusting. I'm so ashamed of him.
Why? How? I don't even understand how you could, bring yourself to do that to somebody who's, that big.
It began as an ordinary Monday morning in Frederick, Colorado, a small, peaceful town built on wide streets, soft sunrise light, and the quiet rhythm of family life. At 8:30 a.m. on August 13, 2018, Sean and Watt's friend, Nicole Atkinson, stood on the front porch of Shannon's two-story home, knocking again and again. There was no answer. Shannon had returned from a business trip the night before. She was 34, pregnant with her third child, and the kind of mother everyone admired, organized, vibrant, proud of her little girls, Bella and Celeste. She had never missed a doctor's appointment. She had never gone silent. By late morning, worry hardened into dread. Nicole called the police for a welfare check. When officers arrived, the house was still. Shannon's car sat in the garage. Her phone and purse were inside. Her daughter's favorite blankets lay folded on the couch. But there was no trace of Shannon, no laughter of children echoing through the halls. Just a silence that felt wrong. Her husband, Christopher Watts, arrived moments later. Calm. Composed. He spoke politely to officers, gave permission to search. He told them he had no idea where his wife and daughters were. But something about him didn't fit the scene. His voice lacked urgency. His eyes avoided theirs. He folded his arms tightly, as though holding back something enormous. The search grew quickly. Neighbors, friends, the community, all began to look for Shannon, Bella, and Celeste. Their photos filled Facebook, the news, every television in Colorado. The perfect family of 4, suddenly gone. And in those early hours, only one person knew why. Christopher Watts, the father, the husband, the man who appeared devastated on local television, was already hiding the unthinkable. And in the shadows of his double life stood another figure, a woman few had ever heard of. Her name was Nichol Kessinger. She wasn't a murderer, nor a victim, but she would become one of the most controversial names in one of America's most haunting modern crimes. Nichol worked in environmental safety at Anadarko Petroleum, the same company where Chris Watts worked as an operator. They met in the spring of 2018. She described him as quiet, kind, reserved. He told her he was separated, nearly divorced. He said his marriage was ending, that he and his wife were moving on. There was no mention of pregnancy, no mention of reconciliation. As the summer deepened, so did their relationship. Texts became daily, phone calls constant. They spent weekends together, went hiking, shared dinners. To Nichol, Chris seemed peaceful, a man reclaiming his life. But while he played the part of a new lover, his wife Shannon was posting family photos online, smiling beside the man she believed still loved her. Two worlds, one of devotion, one of deceit, were moving toward collision. By early August, cracks were forming. Shannon had noticed Chris pulling away. During a trip to North Carolina, she messaged friends that something felt off. He wasn't calling as much. He seemed distant, cold, robotic. Her texts grew desperate, asking if he still wanted the marriage, asking what she had done wrong. He gave short, emotionless replies. Behind those words lay a man consumed by another life, another woman, and a deadly fantasy of freedom. The morning Shannon disappeared, the illusion shattered. Chris Watts stood in front of cameras pleading for his family's safe return. Shannon, Bella, Celeste, if you're out there, come back. His voice trembled, his eyes glistened. The nation watched a grieving husband beg for help. But detectives, and even the public, sensed something was wrong. That same day, surveillance footage from the neighbor's camera revealed a chilling clue. Just before sunrise, Chris Watts was seen backing his truck into the driveway, loading it for several minutes before driving away. Later, he would say he was heading to work. But investigators would soon learn what he carried wasn't equipment. It was evidence. In the following hours, investigators began piecing together timelines, phone pings, texts, GPS data. They interviewed co-workers, neighbors, and family members. Slowly, the facade began to crumble. And in that unraveling came the first whisper of another name, Nichol Kessinger. When police contacted Nichol, she appeared shocked. She had seen the news, recognized Chris immediately, and realized that the man she had been seeing was not separated, he was married to a woman who was now missing. Her voice in interviews was anxious, her tone uneasy. She turned over her phone voluntarily, providing messages, call logs, and Google searches that painted a vivid picture of the affair. She told detectives she had believed Chris was divorcing, that he was a good man trapped in a bad marriage. But investigators saw something more, a man leading a double life, and a woman whose presence had ignited his desire for a clean slate. A clean slate without his wife, without his daughters. On August 15, after hours of interrogation, Chris Watts confessed.
Were now confessing to killing his wife Shanann and their two daughters, Bella and Celeste.
It came in a jailhouse confession and featured in a Dr. Phil exclusive today right here on News.
To police at first, but to his father, in a quiet moment behind closed doors. He admitted that Shanann was gone, that he had killed her after an argument. He tried to claim she had harmed the children first. It was a lie within a lie. Soon after, detectives found Shanann's body buried in a shallow grave at an oil site where Chris worked. Nearby, they discovered the remains of Bella and Celeste inside oil tanks. The story that gripped America was no longer a mystery, it was a horror. A father had murdered his pregnant wife and two daughters. But the question that lingered was why? And for many, that question led back to the quiet woman who had unknowingly walked into his life just months before. From the outside, their affair seemed like a spark. Two people drawn together by loneliness and timing. But beneath the surface, the warning signs glowed bright. Chris Watts had built a world of contradictions. To Nichol Kessinger, he was gentle, affectionate, available. To Shanann, he was distant, detached, and unpredictable. Friends noticed Shanann's tone change in texts. She told them she felt something was off, that Chris seemed like a stranger. She tried to fix the marriage, planned counseling, reached out with love. But Chris's responses grew colder, his smiles thinner. When he flew out to join her in North Carolina that summer, their once intimate bond felt replaced by silence. During this same period, Chris and Nichol's relationship was escalating. They searched online for secluded getaways, apartment listings, even wedding dresses. Nichol later told investigators she wanted a simple, honest life, a future. She claimed she never imagined he would destroy his family to make it possible. But digital footprints told another story. Chris researched how long it takes for a person to die by strangulation. He deleted texts, hid photos, and used secret apps. He told Nichol his house was empty, that his wife was gone. She believed him. To detectives later, she said she saw no violence in him, no red flags, only passion and quiet intensity. Yet, the truth was already spiraling toward catastrophe. Every lie brought him closer to murder. Every deleted message erased another trace of his humanity. And on the night of August 12, while Shanann was flying home from her trip, Chris sent his last message to Nichol, a simple goodnight. Hours later, he would end 3 lives. The red flags weren't subtle. They were neon, jealousy, secrecy, deceit, glowing brightly enough for anyone to see. But Nichol, blinded by infatuation, and Shanann, bound by loyalty, saw only the man they wanted to believe in. The night of August 12, 2018, was heavy and still. Shawn Watt's flight from Arizona landed just before 2 a.m. She was exhausted, 24 weeks pregnant, her suitcase dragging behind her as she entered her quiet home in Frederick, Colorado. Upstairs, her husband lay awake, waiting. In the hours that followed, a home that had once echoed with laughter became a silent stage for murder. The events that took place between 2 a.m. and sunrise would later be pieced together only through confession, forensic evidence, and the grim logic of a man desperate to control his own narrative. Chris Watts told investigators that Shawn confronted him about an affair, that she wanted to fix the marriage, that she begged for honesty. Instead of truth, he gave her death. He strangled her in their bedroom, ending not only her life but the life of their unborn son, Nico. When it was over, the house fell into an eerie calm. But two small voices still called out for their mother. Bella and Celeste, 4 and 3 years old, were awake. Confused. Chris told police they asked what was wrong with Mommy. He couldn't answer. What came next was darkness beyond comprehension. In the early hours of dawn, he wrapped Shannon's body in a sheet, loaded it into his work truck, and placed his daughters inside, alive. The security camera from his neighbor's house captured his silhouette moving back and forth, methodically loading what he claimed were tools. It was a quiet efficiency that only comes when guilt hasn't yet met reality. He drove for nearly an hour to an isolated oil site owned by his company. The morning sky was pale and cold, the kind of light that makes everything look too honest. There, in that barren expanse, Chris ended his daughters' lives one by one. The same hands that once held them carried them up to the oil tanks, small bodies hidden where no one was meant to find them. Shawn he buried nearby in a shallow grave. Then, he went to work. As if nothing had happened. He answered texts. He smiled at coworkers. He even chatted casually about his day. A mask of normalcy covering the monster underneath. Back home, friends grew frantic when Shawn didn't answer calls. By mid-morning, police were already at his door, searching for the family he had just buried. The lies came quickly. She went to a friend's house, we had a talk, I don't know where she is. Each excuse thinner than the one before. Chris Watts wanted freedom, from responsibility, from family, from the image of the perfect husband. But in chasing that freedom, he traded everything human for a hollow void of deceit. By sunrise, 3 lives were gone, and one man's mask began to crack. What he thought he had buried in the quiet soil of Colorado was about to resurface, exposing every lie, every secret, every shadow he'd tried to hide. Morning light spilled across the Watts home, revealing nothing of the horror that had unfolded just hours before. The driveway looked ordinary. The neighborhood quiet. Yet behind those calm walls, Chris Watts was already crafting his story, one that would unravel faster than he could control. By 8 a.m., Shannon's best friend, Nichol Kessinger, had already grown uneasy. Shawn never missed a doctor's appointment, especially one involving her pregnancy. Repeated calls went unanswered. Texts remained unread. Nichol drove straight to the Watts home, pounding on the door. No response. The silence was deafening. She called the police. When officers arrived, Chris finally appeared, calm, collected, and oddly cooperative. He invited them in, let them search the house, even opened Shannon's closet to show her clothes still hanging neatly in place. But there was something off. His voice carried no urgency, no panic. Just a detached politeness that unsettled everyone in the room. Outside, the neighbor's security camera offered the first crack in his facade. The footage showed Chris backing his truck into the garage before dawn, something he had never done before. The officer noticed his nervous shifting, the way his arms crossed defensively when the video played. The neighbor whispered to police, "He's not acting right. He's usually talkative. Today, he's quiet." As the search expanded, Chris appeared on television, pleading for the safe return of his wife and daughters. But his eyes betrayed him. They were hollow, his words rehearsed. Public sympathy quickly turned to suspicion. Behind the scenes, detectives began to piece together inconsistencies. His timeline didn't match phone records. His story about their emotional conversation before Shanann's disappearance seemed rehearsed. And then came the digital trail, a trail that would expose everything. Nichol Kessinger, the woman he'd been seeing, came forward. She told investigators she had no idea Shanann was pregnant. She thought the couple was already separated. But when the news broke that Shanann and the girls were missing, she realized the truth, and fear set in. She turned over her phone, revealing hundreds of text messages, secret searches, and deleted data. Chris had been planning a new life with her. Detectives brought him in again, this time, for a polygraph. The test didn't lie. He failed miserably. When confronted with the results, Chris broke. But even his confession came coated in cowardice. He blamed Shanann, claiming she had killed the children and that he'd reacted in rage. Investigators knew better. The evidence spoke louder. Cadaver dogs alerted to the scent of death inside the house. GPS data from his work truck traced the route to the oil site. And when police searched that desolate area, they found the truth buried beneath the dirt and hidden inside the oil tanks. 3 lives. 1 grave. And a man who thought lies could cover murder. Chris Watts had built his life on deception. But under the weight of truth, his story, and his soul, began to collapse. The courtroom was heavy with silence, the kind that feels alive, pulsing with grief, rage, and disbelief. When Chris Watts was led inside, shackled and hollow-eyed, the air seemed to thicken. There was no trace of the charming husband or smiling father once shown on family photos. Instead, he looked like a shell, the weight of his actions etched deep into every motionless expression. The world watched as the man who had smiled on camera and begged for his family's return now faced the truth of what he had done. Prosecutors laid it out piece by piece, a timeline of deceit that painted a chilling portrait of a man willing to sacrifice everything for a fantasy. They described how he had strangled Shanann, then taken the lives of his daughters, Bella and Celeste, before disposing of their small bodies in crude oil tanks. It wasn't a moment of rage. It was methodical. Calculated. Cold. The plea deal came quickly. Facing overwhelming evidence, DNA traces, cell phone data, and a confession that changed with every retelling, Chris agreed to plead guilty to avoid the death penalty. It was a decision that spared him execution but condemned him to something arguably worse, a lifetime of silence and memory behind bars. In court, Shanann's family sat shoulder to shoulder, clutching photos of the woman and children whose lives had been stolen. Shanann's mother, Frankie Rzusek, trembled as she listened to the details of how her daughter's final moments unfolded. Her tears fell quietly, but her words when she addressed the court pierced through the air like glass. She said she forgave Chris, not for him, but for her own peace. Yet forgiveness did not mean forgetting. The judge's words carried the final blow. He spoke of betrayal, how Chris had murdered those who loved him most, how his selfishness had ripped apart an entire community. He called it the most inhumane and vicious crime he had ever seen. When the sentence was read, 5 life terms without the possibility of parole, plus 48 years for unlawful termination of pregnancy, no one cheered. There was no victory in justice that day. Only silence. As Chris was led away, he didn't look back. He didn't cry. The same emptiness that had haunted investigators during his interviews lingered now in the courtroom. Some said it was guilt. Others believed it was nothing at all, a man stripped of humanity. In the years since, he has remained in prison, where the walls are lined with the echoes of his crimes. He writes letters, prays, and claims to have found God. But the world remembers him differently. As a warning, as proof of how far deceit can go when darkness finds a willing host. Justice had been served, but peace would never be full. The sentence may have ended the trial, but the story of Chris and Shanann Watts would haunt the nation forever. When the final gavel fell, the courtroom emptied, but the echo of that day lingered far beyond its walls. In Frederick, Colorado, the Watts home sat like a scar on the quiet suburban street, blinds drawn, mailbox overflowing, a chilling reminder of the darkness that had lived within. Neighbors who once waved at Shanann and watched the girls play in the yard now crossed the street when walking by. The laughter that had once drifted from the driveway was gone, replaced by silence heavy enough to make the air feel colder. For Shanann's family, grief became a constant companion. Her parents, Frank and Sandy Rzusek, struggled to comprehend how someone they had welcomed into their family, the man who stood beside their daughter at the altar, could destroy everything she had built. Every photograph, every video of the girls giggling, became both a treasure and a wound. They spoke publicly not for sympathy, but to keep Shanann's story alive, to remind the world that she was more than a headline, more than a victim. Frank Rzusek once stood outside his home, trembling as he thanked the public for their prayers. His voice cracked as he said that justice had been served, but that no sentence could bring his family back. He asked for privacy, for peace, but in the digital age, peace was fleeting. Online, speculation spiraled. Some questioned Nichol Kessinger's role, digging into her past, her statements, her silence. Others attacked or defended her, turning tragedy into noise. The Rzuseks begged for it to stop. They wanted people to remember love, not theories. Meanwhile, the community that once felt safe began locking doors earlier, checking on neighbors more often. Churches held vigils, lighting candles for Shanann, Bella, Celeste, and the unborn Nico. Photos of the smiling family lined the steps of the local parish, each candle flame flickering against the night like a small rebellion against evil. Mothers clutched their children tighter. Fathers stared longer at the faces around their dinner tables. In the months that followed, the house on Saratoga Trail became a symbol of horror, a haunted shell of what family life was supposed to be. It went up for auction, but no one wanted it. To this day, it stands as a quiet ghost in a bright neighborhood, an empty monument to betrayal. For Nichol Kessinger, the aftermath was equally consuming. She vanished from public view, changing her name and disappearing from the grid. Her life was forever marked by her connection to the case, a reminder of how one person's lies can swallow many lives in their wake. Years later, the pain hasn't dulled. The Rzusek family visits their graves, leaving flowers, toys, and handwritten notes. They speak to the wind, to the memories, to the love that still lingers. And for everyone who followed the case, strangers, neighbors, even police, the lesson remains painfully clear: evil doesn't always come in the form of a stranger. Sometimes, it sleeps beside you, smiles for the camera, and calls itself family. Even after years of investigation, confession, and sentencing, the story of Chris Watts, and the silent figure of Nichol Kessinger, remains tangled in confusion, speculation, and unanswered questions. It is a story that refuses to rest, like a whisper that echoes through the corners of true crime forums and late-night conversations. Because beneath the surface of this tragedy lies something deeper, something that still doesn't make sense. How does a man, a father so devoted in every photo and video, suddenly turn into a monster capable of destroying his entire family? What darkness brewed in him that no one saw? Or did they see it, and simply look away? Was it an instant of rage, or a plan long set in motion? And what about Nichol Kessinger, the woman whose name became a ghost tied to this case? She told investigators she knew nothing of Shanann's pregnancy. She said she believed Chris was separated, that their relationship was born from loneliness, not deceit. But digital footprints tell a different story: deleted messages, secret searches, quiet gaps in the timeline that make you wonder, how much did she truly know? Was she another victim of his manipulation, or a piece of the puzzle that still doesn't fit? There are details that linger, tiny inconsistencies that spark doubt. The missing minutes between Chris leaving for work and the moment he was first seen on camera. The strange calmness in his interviews. The way he described the murders in his later prison letters, detached, almost mechanical. It's as if we're staring at a story told in fragments, and one crucial piece is still missing. Even the investigators have admitted, something about the timeline feels off. There are theories, some wild, some hauntingly logical, that suggest Chris didn't act alone. Others argue he was fully in control, but still hiding the complete truth. Could there have been a deeper motive, a darker fantasy, or an accomplice who vanished into the shadows of the case? And then there's Nichol's disappearance from public life. She changed her name, erased her history, and slipped into obscurity. But for many, that vanishing act only raised more suspicion. Was she running from the world, or from what she knew? The Watts case is over, legally, at least. But in the court of public curiosity, it's far from finished. The internet continues to dig, to dissect, to question. Every interview clip, every police report, every word in Chris's letters is analyzed again and again. Because people can't shake the feeling that something, or someone, is still in the dark. Maybe the full truth died with Shanann, Bella, and Celeste. Or maybe it's still out there, buried under layers of lies, waiting for someone to dig deep enough to uncover it. So, what really happened in the shadows of that Colorado home? And when the truth finally comes to light, will it bring closure, or something even darker? If you want to find out, make sure you subscribe to Shadow of Deceit, turn on notifications, and join us as we unravel the next untold story, where every secret casts a shadow. Time moves forward, but the story of the Watts family remains suspended, frozen in that unbearable August morning when everything changed. The case has been dissected, documented, and replayed across the world, yet the unease it stirs refuses to fade. Because the truth, even when written in black and white, still feels incomplete, as if something vital remains buried beneath the lies. People still ask, why? What could drive a man with a picture-perfect family to commit something so unimaginable? Was it love twisted into obsession? A life so tightly wound that it finally snapped? Or something far darker, a complete absence of empathy hiding behind a mask of normalcy? Chris Watts sits behind bars, his words shifting with every interview, his motives growing murkier with every retelling. He claims remorse. He claims enlightenment. But can remorse ever exist where deceit was so absolute? He has no freedom left to lose, yet his story continues to control the narrative, a reminder that monsters often look ordinary, and evil doesn't always announce itself with a roar. Sometimes, it whispers. And then there's Nichol Kessinger, the ghost at the edge of the story. She vanished into anonymity, but the questions she left behind linger like smoke. Did she truly not know what was happening? Was she blindsided, or complicit in a way even she can't fully comprehend? She may never speak publicly again, but her name is now forever carved into a tragedy she can never escape. For Shanann's family, time hasn't healed, it has only hardened the edges of grief. They continue to honor her memory, to keep her voice alive, even as the rest of the world moves on to the next story, the next crime, the next shadow. But for them, the loss isn't history, it's every sunrise without Shanann's messages, every quiet evening without the sound of the girl's laughter. The Watts home still stands, silent and empty. Some say it's haunted, not by spirits, but by the memory of what was lost. Its windows reflect the world outside, but nothing inside moves. It's a monument to deceit, a place where love turned into something unrecognizable. In the end, the story of Chris and Shanann Watts is more than a tale of murder. It's a cautionary echo, a reminder that darkness often grows unnoticed until it consumes everything in its reach. That behind even the brightest smiles, deceit can cast the deepest shadows. But one question still lingers, have we truly heard the full truth, or just the version that's been allowed to surface? Because in every crime, there's what's proven, and then there's what remains hidden. And sometimes, what stays hidden is far more terrifying. If this story left you questioning what's real and what lies beneath, don't look away now. The shadows never rest, and neither do we. Subscribe to Shadow of Deceit, turn on notifications, and join us as we step into the next story, because in the world of true crime, the darkest truths are the ones still waiting to be found. You thought the story ended when the cell door closed. But what if I told you, it didn't? From deep inside a Wisconsin prison, Chris Watts began writing, pages filled with confessions, dreams, and twisted reflections. Letters that reveal a man still haunted by his lies, and maybe, by something darker. Whispers of voices in his cell. Claims of visions of Shanann and the girls. And words that hint at another truth, one that never made it into the courtroom. Are these the ramblings of guilt? Or fragments of a secret he's still keeping? In our next episode of Shadow of Deceit, we open the secret letters of Chris Watts, exploring what the killer says now, and what his words might still be hiding. Because in this case, even behind bars, the deceit never truly ends.